Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be counting down the hardest raid bosses in Classic Wrath of the Lich King. I definitely think the difficulty has been taken up a notch in Wrath of the Lich King with its hard modes and heroic modes being introduced. I'm not putting them in order of difficulty in this video because I think that would cause too many arguments, but let me know guys in the comment section below what order you would put them in personally.
Oh my! I wasn't expecting company! The workshop is such a mess! How embarrassing! Oh,
First of all, we have Mimiron Hard Mode. Mimiron is a little Jeeves looking robot dude who controls, I guess, what you would call a tank, but it's kind of a cross between a tank and the Terminator. Throughout the encounter, the tank becomes bigger and bigger as Mimiron adds modifications to it. Even non-hard mode, this is a pretty complex fight, since there are 4 different phases to be aware of, with lots of nitty-gritty mechanics to be aware of that can easily catch you off guard. The first little nitty-gritty thing is proximity mines. These pop up around the room, and when you stand over them they deal 1200 damage, so standing over 2 is normally going to kill most players. And the issue is that you do have to move around the room a lot in order to avoid other mechanics. For instance, when the melee have to move out of melee range very quickly on Shock Blast, it's very common that their path is covered in mines, so they've got to be careful about, what position and what direction they're taking. Meanwhile, Napalm Strike has also been shot at a random player that deals 8k damage with another 3200 over 8 seconds, so they need to be healed through that. Stage 2, you have to deal with a gunner component, VX001. He will shoot various different abilities around the room and players have to run in a circle around the room to avoid everything. Stage 3, you have to deal with his helicopter and his robots. The helicopter is going to shoot plasma ball at random players that deals 10k damage. Then you have the bomb bots. These run at a random player and explode for 26k AoE damage, and yeah, they normally just wipe the raid. You have to have the tank taunt and soak them, or have a DK to chains of ice them, and then obviously the range to take them down. They don't actually have a lot of health. Then the assault bots have to be killed to loot a magnetic core, and then you use this magnetic core to get the helicopter down so that you can DPS it into the next phase. The last phase is its final form, VO17R0N. In this phase he keeps his phase 1 abilities but also does laser barrage, where he'll shoot for 20k damage every 0.3 seconds in a random direction, which is always very fun. Plus he will actually repair himself if any of his parts are destroyed, which means you have to make sure that each part of his tank is killed within a few seconds of each other, which can be very hard to coordinate because everyone's DPS is very unpredictable and different. Oh, and that's just normal mode, without the hard mode mechanics in place. You see, there's actually a button you can press at the end of the room to activate hard mode. It's a big red button, obviously, and this will start the fight and will automatically increase the damage and health of the boss and his adds by 25%. The first big addition is flames. So flames will build up around the room, so you now have to avoid flames and the mines. If you don't push the first phase fast enough, you will get overwhelmed by the flames and the mines. You have to last long enough for flame suppressant to go out, which is a big AoE effect in the room to douse all the flames. In phase 2 you also have to avoid Frost Bomb. That is basically a one-shotting AoE ability, but it does, luckily, douse the flies like flame suppressant does. In helicopter phase, there's a new robot called the Emergency Firebot. They have to be killed instantly because they will silence anyone within 10 yards and deal 21k damage, knocking them back, and obviously there's a risk of them being knocked back into the flames. So as you can see, this is a very complex fight with many different mechanics to be aware of. It will require some studying before you attempt it, because forgetting one mechanic can easily get you killed. And when people start to die on this boss, it's really hard to recover because you need to push the phases really fast. Otherwise the whole room will just get smothered in flames.
Good news, everyone! I think I've perfected a plague that will destroy all life on Azeroth!
Next we have Professor Putricide on heroic mode. The thing that makes this fight so hard is that most of the encounter, everyone is just taking some kind of damage from anywhere. First thing you need to deal with is a mutated abomination. Normally the off-tank will have to control it. All he has to do is click the altar to be turned into the mutated abomination, and now his first job is to eat up the oozes that fall on the floor, otherwise the room will be covered in them and nobody will be able to move anywhere. And this is bad because this encounter actually does require a lot of moving about and a lot of kiting. You have to kite the orange gas clouds because if they get into melee range of a player they'll explode with impungent gas. That deals massive AoE damage to the entire raid and can easily cause a wipe. The other slime called the Volatile Ooze will lock the player in place, and when it gets into melee range will explode for 170k damage, split between all players who are close. So you normally have to stack up and soak them by everyone getting into melee range of a guy who's fixated. Normally you have to do that the first time, and he will, because what it does, after he's dealt with one player, he'll just go and deal with another player, he'll go and fixate on another player. So you really have to kill the ooze as quickly as possible, but we will probably have to soak the first one. The person controlling the mutated abomination, what he can do is use regurgitated ooze on oozes to slow the movement speed by 50% to make that process a little bit easier. But overall, as you can tell, there's a lot of AoE damage going out, so the healers have to deal with it. And if you don't get these oozes down fast enough, then they're just going to dish out insane AoE damage to everyone, and the healers will not be able to cope. In phase 2 he starts to drop choking gas bombs randomly on the raid. They explode after 20 seconds, killing all players within 10 yards, so this massively restricts where you can stand in the boss room. On top of this he casts Malibu Goo, which takes the form of a bouncing green slime ball. If you get caught by it, it will deal 20k AoE damage and slow your attack and cast speeds by 200%. Oh, and a great thing about the last phase is that he can actually start to heal himself. He begins to stack Mutated Plague on the tank that lasts 1 minute and stacks every 10 seconds, but if it runs out or is removed, then the boss will be healed for 300k health for every stack, and this debuff deals AoE damage to the entire raid, so this is when the healing becomes the most intense. You want this phase to be as short as possible, it's definitely the bloodlust phase. Now in heroic mode, to make things harder, the boss infects a random player with Unbound Plague. It inflicts damage every 1 second, and you can normally only survive about 12 seconds of this before you have to move near another player to infect them with it. Once you have passed on the disease, you will get a debuff that increases the damage you take from Unbound Plague, so you have to be careful not to pass it on to someone who has already had it, otherwise they're basically just dead. This mechanic is only a small one, but requires a massive amount of perfect micromanagement, otherwise your raid members will slowly get picked off one by this disease, and you got to do this while also dealing with all the other mechanics. Also, dealing with the ads becomes more difficult in heroic. On every single phase, well, phase change anyway, he's going to spawn both kinds of oozes, and only half the raid will be able to attack one type of ooze, and the other half be able to attack the other, so obviously the orange and the green. This means you can't focus all your DPS on one ooze at a time, which means it's a severe DPS check, because if half the raid can't take down the oozes in time, you're going to trigger their AoE damage. Definitely one of those fights where, especially on 10-man mode heroic, if one person just isn't on the ball and messes up, it really is just game over. Even on 25-man, to be honest, because all the damage is ramped up on 25-man.
Death's cold embrace awaits.
And last but not least, we have the boss we've all been expecting, the Lich King on 25-man heroic. This is one of the longest boss encounters in Wrath of the Lich King, which will really push every player to their limit. It requires a balanced setup of different classes with different toolkits. For instance, you will definitely need a class that can remove diseases, since the first problematic mechanic is Necrotic Plague. This is a lethal disease that infects the target and deals 50k damage every 5 seconds. Okay, and if a target dies, which it obviously very likely will because it's dealing so much damage, it will jump to another target with double damage. So if this isn't dispelled instantly, then yeah, you are just going to wipe the raid. Meanwhile, Infest is also popping off. What this does is it deals 7k damage to the raid, but will also put a shadow damage tick on the whole raid that increases every second, but will be removed when the player is above 90% health. And this is why Shadow Priest is quite useful here, because they can top everyone up in their party with Vampiric Embrace. Holy Priest also very useful with their cheap AoE heals like Circle of Healing. Point is, a lot of AoE healing does have to go out, otherwise that damage is going to slowly just ramp up and then it will just be too late. Also in heroic mode you have to deal with void zones spawning everywhere that one-shot people, because if you don't move out of them fast enough, they will just knock you off the platform. The fight switches between remorseless winter phases and then normal tanking phases, where the Lich King stands in the centre of the room and deals AoE frost damage to everyone within 45 yards, so you have to move to the edge of the platform. And when this phase ends, the actual edge of the platform will break and fall. If you don't move fast enough, you're just going to drop to your death. There's also some difficult ads to deal with during this phase, actually both phases, that hit really hard and silence players. In phase 2 it gets even better. The Valkyries start to pick up players and drop them off the edge. If you DPS them down to 50%, they will drop the players, but multiple ones are going to spawn at once, and they are pretty beefy. They have a big health pool, so you have to be crafty about splitting your DPS and using snares and stuns. There's also a mini Frostmourne phase where the Lich King pulls you into Frostmourne and you have to run around the room dodging the wicked spirits that fall down, and once they've reached the ground they deal more than enough damage to kill a player. You also have to interrupt and kill the Spirit Warden who is trying to kill Tirana's spirit. If anyone dies during this phase, you will actually buff the Lich King and it will likely cause a wipe, so no deaths when you go into Frostmourne. And from here it's largely a rinse and repeat process until you finally hit the RP where he kills everyone and you help Tyrion finish the Lich King off. But I did honestly miss a few mechanics here and there because honestly, this isn't a raid guide video and it's getting too detailed and, and the script is getting way too long. Another honourable mention I was going to include was Yogg-Saron hard mode, but the video again ended up too long for that. This fight is very difficult without any of the Ulduar Guardians helping you. Well, like I said at the beginning of the video, Wrath raids are definitely stepping up in difficulty compared to TBC. Progression is going to be slower. Hopefully the world first races will be a little bit more interesting to watch. But anyway guys, that is going to be the end of the video there. My name is MetaGoblin. To my next video, ciao.